vinyl lovers. We're back up here in the Vinyl Attic for another part of our countdown, count up, count around of 100 great albums that should be in your record collection. I'm really happy to be back. Last week's video about the Ringo album, Roto Gravure, sparked some debate about what this 100 is all about. And it's not 100 essential albums or 100 greatest albums. It's 100 albums that I think are cool. And if you have them in your record collection, I think you'll look cool too, because that's what it is. It's about the music, the significance of the music, and how it makes us feel in the world. And we want to feel cool. That's why we love vinyl, right? So we got a great record. I'm so excited. I've been wanting to talk about this record for a long time. We are going to talk about a record that broke a lot of boundaries in the early 1980s. We are going to focus on King Crimson's 1981, September 1981 release, Discipline, and why this record is so freaking important and why it will blow your mind. So, King Crimson had been around for a bit. This was their first album in 6 or 7 years. This came out in 81. Red was the last album that came out before that with in 1974. That was a pretty big gap. They had a great run from their first records, a couple different lineups, starting with the Court of the Crimson King right there in 1969. Really Robert Fripp's band, and he assembles some of these great people. I mean, the lineup on the Red album was Fripp, drummer Bill Bruford, who had been one of the founding members of Yes, and John Wetton, who then later went on to fame in Asia, and that supergroup. John Wetton playing with a lot of people like UK, and so it's the prog rock supergroup that with this rotating membership. After the Red album, Fripp went on to do sort of more Frippertronic stuff, including his work with Eno, his amazing work with David Bowie, and the Heroes record. He had a couple solo records out, and did, I think in 1980, the work he did before this was with Bowie on the Scary Monsters album, and just, this really innovative guitar style that Robert Fripp is famous for. Then he reassembles the band in the early 1980s, and it still has Bill Bruford on drums, but brings in Adrian Belew, who at that point was probably most famous for working with the Talking Heads, and their sort of later Remain in Light era stuff later. Not the early stuff, the late 70s, early 80s stuff. And Tony Levin on stick on the bass, who in 1980 I knew mainly as the bass player on John Lennon's Double Fantasy record. He was also on Ringo's Ringo the Fourth record, that horrible album, but mainly viewed as Peter Gabriel's bass player. So there's this sort of new super lineup that records this album. And when this comes out, let me tell you, I'm working in a record store in 1981, and the old heads, the old kind of Frank Zappa, John Coltrane guys, when this record came out, were flipping out because it was so out of this world. How do you describe this record? Adrian Belews' guitar style is really influenced by kind of world music sounds, a lot of Nigerian kind of guitar sounds. Bill Bruford, his drumming on this record is insane. I don't know what was happening, but it's just like an explosion of drum sounds, and of course Tony Levin on the stick. And this record was kind of influenced by New Wave and the Talking Heads and the Bowie, Eno stuff that Fripp had been involved in, but also a lot of spoken word. One of the songs on here is called Sheltering Sky. Paul Bowles' great beat novel. In fact, the follow-up to this album that came out the next year, Beat, is really sort of dedicated to the Beat poets. Even a piece about Jack Kerouac on here. Had a great video on MTV, Heartbeat. I loved it. But this record incorporated some spoken word stuff, some found sound. There is this strange track on here called Phil Hun Jinji, which is an acronym for something else, that was based on when they were recording this in London. And this is something that I used to do in the early 80s too. I'd walk around with a Walkman and just record sounds. So Adrian Belew is walking around London, and he just runs into this gang that starts harassing him. And then later the police harass him, and he goes back to the studio, and he's telling the band about this thing that happened to him, and he just got harassed by these people living in London, and it's this dangerous place. And unbeknownst to Adrian Belew, Fripp was recording Adrian Belew's retelling of the story of the recording. So that ended up on this record. It's really great if you get the original vinyl version, because some of the guitar parts were lifted off of later editions. Some of the Robert Fripp stuff has been lifted off. There's this great melody frame by frame. Elephant Talk is more crazy spoken word stuff. I mean, it's almost like poetry meets prog rock, and is just, there's just nothing else that sounds like it. And it is so manic. The second side, 2 of the 3 songs on the second side are instrumentals, beautiful instrumentals, including the Sheltering Sky track. And there's just nothing else that sounds like it. I mean, I'm so excited to share this with people who don't know, who may know sort of the Chord of the Crimson King, the kind of heavy prog stuff from the late 60s and early 70s, and don't know this era of King Crimson, where it was influenced by all this other stuff, but there's this kind of crazy energy that happens in the room. And it made me think about, I was sort of replaying this, and I was just sort of focusing on Bill Bruford's drumming and how intense and explosive it is. And it reflects one of the favorite things I like to do when listening to music, to be present. I wanted to share this with you, is that we listen to songs and the whole song washes over us, and we know the song from beginning to end, and we maybe have a little bit of part of it. But there's an active listening exercise that you can do when you listen to a song. So take your favorite song and just focus on one aspect. Like, it could be Aretha Franklin's background singers on Respect. Just focus on that. Or Ringo's drumming on Helter Skelter. Just focus on that. I love to listen to the So What album by Miles Davis, and just focus on John Coltrane. Well, people don't know this Coltrane playing saxophone. Just focus on the Coltrane saxophone in the particular track that you're listening to. And that's a way of being present with the music. Instead of thinking about all this other stuff and the music is just kind of background to your thinking about the past, present, or future, be present with the record. And this album is a perfect one to do that. You could just put on the song Indiscipline, which is pretty intense, and just listen to the drums. Or just listen to the bass. Because, Tony Levin plays a very unique bass style. Or just listen to the weird electronic loops that are coming from Fripp's Frippertonics. Just be in the music in that moment. King Crimson continued to put out really great records, and I think one of the great things that was a part of the COVID lockdown, if we can say anything, was Robert Fripp and his wife Toya Wilcox, who a lot of people, if you know English music, know Toya Wilcox. Those of you that have seen the movie Quadrophenia have seen Toya Wilcox. They did these series of live videos during the lockdown of Robert Fripp, this guitar genius, and Toya Wilcox, who looks amazing. I think she's in her 60s, and she just looks amazing, doing cover versions of like Black Sabbath songs and Madonna songs, and it's really entertaining. I'll include a link, and to see that Robert Fripp is still sort of engaged in pushing the boundaries of music, I really appreciate it. I became a huge Adrian Belew fan after this record, including his solo stuff, and about 10 or 12 years ago, I actually had a date with Adrian Belew's daughter. I had one date, I won't tell you how it happened, and I didn't know that she was his daughter, and we were talking about music or something, and we were talking about the Talking Heads, and she said, "Oh yeah, my dad played on that record." And I said, "Who's your dad?" And she said, "Adrian Belew." And I went, Lone Rhino, Adrian Belew, Big Electric Cat, Lone Rhino, Talking Heads, David Bowie, King Crimson, that guy. She's like, "Oh, that's my dad." So I was a little bit starstruck, and if I had been in a better place in my life, there might have been a second date, but there wasn't. She was a wonderful person, and I'm happy to have that connection to this great music. So I just wanted to share this little bit. This is something that brings together rock, prog rock, jazz, world music, avant-garde, spoken word. It's all in this record. Oh my God, I feel bad for people who haven't heard this record. I'll put the link to the Spotify in the description, so you can hear a little bit of it. But you should find this version of the vinyl. All right, next we're actually gonna do some country music. I don't know if we've done any country music yet in our 100 albums that must be in your collection count. So we're gonna do something country next week. I'm gonna let that dangle. I've got something that is near and dear to my heart for next week. But King Crimson, Robert Fripp is omnipresent. Like, he's just done so many great records. No pussyfooting. That's all I gotta say. Him and Eno. But this is maybe my favorite contribution that Robert Fripp has made to the world. King Crimson, Discipline. Frame by frame, this record matters so much. This music matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.